Hey guys, I am Vishal and I welcome you all to this session by Edureka. Today I'm going to give you an overview of yet another Microsoft Azure concept. And today's topic of discussion is Azure Data Factory, which is very important from data integration and data management perspective. But before we do go ahead and dive into the concepts of this particular term, let's quickly start by taking a look at today's agenda first. I would start things off by talking about why do we need Azure Data Factory and what it is exactly. Then I would talk about various concepts that surround this particular term. We would also understand something called as data lake, not into depth, but to some extent. And we would also understand various concepts that surround this term as well. I would discuss two other terms, that is data lake and data warehouse, and what is the difference between these two terms. And finally, I would finish things off with the demo part. As far as this demo goes, I would be talking about creating a pipeline and moving data from one source to the other. But that is for the later part. Let's start with the first topic of discussion, that is Azure Data Factory. So why do we need Azure Data Factory? Well, first and foremost, we need to understand the fact that the amount of data that is being generated these days is huge. And this data comes from different sources. Now, when we move this particular data to cloud, there are quite a few things that needs to be taken care of. Now, this data, it can come in any form because we are talking about different sources. And these different sources would transfer or channelize this data in different ways, and it can be in different formats. So when you do decide to bring this data on cloud or at a particular storage place, you need to make sure that this data is well and truly managed. Now, what do I mean by this? Well, you need to transform this data, you need to delete unnecessary part or get rid of all the things that is not needed. Now that is an after part or pre-processing part, but as far as moving this data is concerned, you need to make sure that you pick this data from different sources and bring it at one common place, then store it. And if required, you should be able to transform it into something more meaningful. Now, this is something that can be done by using traditional data warehouse as well, but then there are certain disadvantages. What happens is at times you are forced to go ahead and have custom applications that deal with all these processes individually. And this can be time consuming, and integrating all these sources can be a huge pain. Now, how do we solve this problem? Well, if there was a way to automate this process or create proper workflows, this burden would have been taken care of. Now, this is where Data Factory steps in. What it does is it kind of helps you automate this complete process. Instead of saying automate, I would say it helps you orchestrate this process into a more manageable or organizable manner. Now, that is something that is needed, and that is why we need something called as Data Factory, which lets you automate all these processes. Let us move further and try to understand exactly what Data Factory is. So if I just go ahead and talk about its definition, I would say it is nothing but a cloud-based integration service which lets you do quite a few operations like create data-driven workflows basically, and to go ahead and orchestrate all the sources that are there. But what exactly does it do? To name few common operations, what it does is it helps you create pipelines, which are nothing but, you can think of it as a logical pipeline which supports various processes that happen. It lets you ingest data from different sources and then process it. When we are talking about processing it, it also helps you go ahead and do analytics, which is very important these days because we know that the amount of data that is being generated, it can be helpful and it can help you take various good business decisions. And this is where analytics comes into picture. Now, what Data Factory does is it lets you transform this data and make it ready for something like Data Lake to use it. Now, Data Lake is something that lets you use various analytical tools or methods. Like you have something called as Azure SD Insight, maybe a Hadoop Spark, Azure Data Lake Analytics, and all these things. Now, as we move further, I would be talking about these terms to some extent, but till then you'll have to wait. For now, just understand one thing, that these are nothing but platforms or tools which basically let you go ahead and do various analytical operations. So that is what Data Factory lets you do. It lets you get in all the data, arrange it in a particular manner or order, and then supply it further for various processing or various other things that can be done with that data. So if you talk about particular steps, what does it do exactly? Well, first and foremost, what it does is it helps you collect and connect data. Now, when I say connect, I'm talking about connecting to various sources from which the data can come. Now, there are quite a few disparate sources from which the data can come. You can connect to all these resources by using your Data Factory. And then once you have this data, you can collect it and store it at a central place. Say, for example, your data warehouse. Then comes the process of transforming and enriching it. Now, when I say transforming it, I mean running various patterns on it, creating schemas and all those things. You can then actually go ahead and publish this data. Now, we all know that Microsoft Azure supports various other tools as well. We have one more popular data visualization tool called as Power BI, which is very good when you talk about data integration and various data visualization capabilities. What you can do is you can connect Power BI to your Microsoft Azure and publish this data, that is create various dashboards and all those things. Now that can be very insightful when you talk about it from business intelligence perspective. So yes, you can go ahead and do that as well. And then you can actually go ahead and monitor your data. That means you can take a look at all the data that you have and you can actually go ahead and analyze it in real time as well. So these are the processes which we are talking about. That is connect and collect your data, transform and enrich it, publish it, and monitor it. Now that is what a data factory lets you do. So what are the concepts that surround this particular term? So when we talk about data factory concepts, we have quite a few terms to discuss, like we have pipelines, data sets, activities, and linked services. Let us try to understand these one by one. First, we would be talking about pipeline. Now, pipeline is nothing but think of it as a proper pipeline. That is, it is something which acts as a carrier in which we have various processes taking place. Now, this individual process is nothing but an activity. If you take a look at this slide, you'd understand that activities represent processing step in a pipeline. That means your pipeline can have one or multiple activities. Now, when you talk about this activity, it can be anything. It can be a single process like querying a particular data set, or it can be something like moving data from one source to the other. Then you have something called as data sets. Now, data sets are nothing but sources of data. Say, for example, my data is stored at an N location, and that N location is nothing but my data set. So in simple words, it is nothing but a data structure that holds my data. Linked services. Now, this is nothing but a law. Say, for example, I need to move my data from a particular database to a blob storage. There need to be something that connects these two things. That is a law or some information that lets a database understand that it has to move the data to a particular data source. So that is what a linked service is. It is nothing but an information that tells your data factory that is you need to connect to these particular sources. So these are some of the concepts that form a central part when you talk about a data factory. Now next we are going to talk about something called as data lakes. Now this is something that we won't be seeing in the demo part, but it is important when we talk about data warehousing, and I feel that when I move further or I create more sessions or videos as far as this topic is concerned, I would be talking about analytics and quite a few other terms as well. So this is a particular term which is reserved for those sessions and videos, but for now I would be giving you an overview of this topic as well, because I feel that it is important when we talk about data warehousing we need to understand what data lake is. First of all, let's start by understanding what it is exactly. Now think of it as a container or basically a storage that holds data. Yes, we already have databases, we have so many things. So how is your Azure data lake different? Well, think of it as a hyperscale repository which lets you do quite a few other things. As I've already mentioned, analytics is something that is very important. Now, when we talk about huge amount of data, there are quite a few things which you can do with it. You can use various analytical tools. To name a few, we have some here. We have our Azure Data Lake Analytics, we have SD Insights, R, Spark, and machine learning. Now, these are some of the commonly used and very popular tools which are there. What Azure Data Lake does is it supports all these tools. That means you can store data from any source and in any form at your Azure Data Lake, and then you can use these tools and terms to actually analyze this data. So that is two in one kind of an operation. In fact, it is multiple in one kind of an option basically, because it lets you do so many other things. So what are some of the concepts that one should know? First, let us try to understand some of the components when we talk about this particular term, that is your Azure Data Lake. Basically, it forms of two parts. One is your analytical part and the other one is your storage part. Now, when I talk about the storage part, the best thing about your Azure Data Lake is it does not have any particular schema. That means data from any form can be stored into this particular source. That is, it can come from different sources and it can come in different forms as well. And then you have something called as your analytics part, where you have something called as SD Insight. It lets you form those Hadoop clusters. Now, I won't get into the details of what a Hadoop cluster is, but it is a process or a way by which you can actually analyze data. So yes, you can actually go ahead and create those Hadoop clusters, take that data in and then process it as well. You can also go ahead and use Azure Data Lake. Azure Data Lake Analytics is something which is again used for various machine learning and other analytical process as well. So these are the two things which your analytics part will have. And apart from that, you have something called as Apache Spark, which is nothing but a fast computation processing thing. That is something that lets you process data parallelly and in huge amounts as well. So these are some of the basic concepts when we talk about your Azure data lake. And how does it actually go ahead and process the data? Well, let's see that as well. But there are certain key points which you need to understand. That is, when we talk about Azure Data Lake, the first thing it does is it lets you store data in any size and of any kind, which is very important, because what this does is it kind of takes away the barrier where people had to wait to go ahead and process their data. They had to take this data, first clean it, arrange it, organize it, and then put it somewhere from where they could actually go ahead and use it. Now, this is something you do not have to worry about here. Why? Because you can just go ahead and dump your data in your data lake and then actually take a particular schema, pick that data, and then start processing it. So it helps you save time, and it lets you store data of any kind and any size. Now, the second point is all users productive on day one. That is what I mean. That is, since the data of any type can be stored here, you're not restricted. You can just start working on it from the very first day. And it is ready for any kind of enterprise. That means there is no restriction on what kind of tool do you want to use and what kind of business problem are you dealing with. So what are the types of data that your data lake stores? First and foremost, what it does is it stores structured data, semi-structured data, and unstructured data. That means all the types of data that can possibly be there as far as storing is concerned, everything is taken care of. Now, when I talk about structured data, I'm talking about data that has a particular schema. Then you have something called as your semi-structured data. Now, this is nothing but your JSON files or maybe your XML data. Even that kind of data can be handled. And when I'm talking about particular unstructured data, that is data which can be in text files and has no schema or no pattern whatsoever, even that kind of data can also be stored by your data lake. Now let us try to understand how does it actually store data. If you all know how Hadoop stores data, this would be quite easy to understand. Now we all know that what Hadoop does is it takes your data, it divides it into chunks and then processes it parallelly. Now this is what your data lake also does. Say for example, you have a particular file which has some amount of data. Now as soon as the size of the data goes about 2 GB, it breaks this data into two chunks. Say for example, I have maybe 10 GB of data. So it would break my data into 5 chunks of 2 GB each. And then it would replicate this data. That means 3 copies of this data would be made and it would be stored at 3 different locations or at same location as per the values or rules the user has set. So when you store this data and replicate it at 3 different locations, what happens is even if your data goes down at one place, it is still available at the other place to use it or to recover it rather. Now, when you talk about this particular data storage method, you can read something called as extents in the slide. Now, extents are nothing but these chunks, those 2 GB chunks which are there. And when you process this data using something called as SQL, which is a language that your data lake uses, it actually goes ahead and maps various vertices, which lets you keep track of all this data that is there. So yeah, these are the terms, that is extents and vertices. Now, what happens here is since you're replicating this data and dividing it into chunks, you can actually go ahead and process this data parallelly, saving a lot of time and giving you high computation. It also supports replication of data. This is something that I've already discussed, so I would just move further and try to talk about other concepts as well. Next, we are going to understand what a data lake is and what a data warehouse is. Now, why did I bring this topic up? Well, data warehouse is something that is a traditional approach towards storing data and it is still used widely. But then why do we need data lake and why am I comparing these two terms? Well, quite a few people confuse these two terms as in what is the difference between them exactly. Well, they're quite similar to each other, but there are slight differences which are important and I felt that we should have gone ahead and discussed those. That is why I put this slide here. So let's try to understand that as well. Well, this is a clear differentiation between these two things. That is, first of all, you need to understand that your data lake is nothing but something that is complementary to data warehouse. That means if you have your data at a data lake, that can be stored at data warehouse as well. But there are certain rules that need to be followed. Now, when you talk about your data warehouse, what happens is you can use again your data lake to bring in data. But the main difference is when you talk about a data lake, the data is detailed data or raw data. That means it can be in any particular form. You just need to take the data and dump it into your data lake. That is not the case with your data warehouse. Here the data is filtered, summarized, refined. Now you might wonder that, okay, if everything is happening here at your data warehouse, isn't it better? In some situations, yes, definitely it is better. But as I've already mentioned so many times in this video, the amount of data that is generated these days is huge and it can come from any particular source. This might not be the best of options to deal with. Why? Well, your data lake has something called as schema on read, and your data warehouse has a schema on write kind of an approach. What this does is, if I talk about it from a data warehouse perspective where you have schema on write, that means when you're writing your data to your data warehouse, it is written in a structured form or in a particular schema. So when I'm reading this data, I have to read it in that schema only. But when you talk about a data lake, here you just dump your data. It is not structured. So when you're using this data, you are free to go ahead and define your schema in a number of ways as it suits your needs. So this is where the benefit lies in. That is, your data does not follow a particular schema. You can just go ahead and pick a schema for it. So that is a plus point. Again, one more point. Your data warehouse basically it works in SQL. That is, it uses SQL to query or question your data. But when you talk about your data lake, no matter the data comes from different sources, it can be queried by using one single language, that is your USQL. And again, that actually helps you reduce various barriers because you're talking about different data sources, but still something that lets you access the data is one single programming language. So these were some of the concepts I felt that you all should know. That is what a data factory is and what a data lake is. Again, the reason I talked about data lake was it is an important part when you talk about data warehousing and data integration because all these topics would form a base when you talk about analytics and processing data. And that is why I wanted you all to know all these terminologies. Now, since we started our session talking about data factory, let us move back to data factory and try to visualize all the concepts that we talked about because I talked about something called as pipelines, activities, and all those things. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go ahead and give you a demo where I'm going to actually go ahead and create a database, probably load a table in it, and then move that data from that particular source to a blob storage using a data factory. So yes, this might be a lengthy demo, but I'm sure that you all would like it and have something new to learn out of it. So let me quickly switch to my Azure and we can actually go ahead and see how it works. Okay, so there you go. What I have done is I've gone ahead and I have logged into my so-called Microsoft Azure portal. For people who are completely new to this term, that is Microsoft Azure, what you should do is you should go ahead and take a look at other videos if possible. I've created quite a few videos in this series and those videos talk about various concepts as far as Microsoft Azure goes. There are certain basics as in how should you use it and what are the things that you need to do. One of the things that is there is creating a free account, which is very important. Now we are going to go ahead and use our free account or our subscribed account. What Microsoft Azure does is it lets you have a free account. You need to just register for it and quite a few resources would be made available to you and some credit is also given to you which you can use. That is, you would be charged for these resources, but since you are given certain credit, you can use that and that means the services are freely available to you. If you already have an account, then that is not a problem. We are just going to go ahead and take a look at the demo part. As far as this demo goes, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a database. For that, I need something called as SSMS. Let us go ahead and try to understand what that is first. But if you do not have that thing, you need to go ahead and install it. So how do you do that? Just go to Google basically and type SSMS. This is the first link that you get and you open it. You have your SQL Server Management Studio. Now, this is something that we would be needing. You just come here and you click on it and it would start the setup download. I guess it's getting downloaded twice. I don't need that. I've actually gone ahead and I've installed that thing on my system. I'm doing this for you people. What you need to do is you need to download this particular file. Now, as you can see, it is somewhere around 800 MBs. That is approximately equal to 1 GB. So you need to download that file. And once you do go ahead and download that file, you need to install it in your system. The installation can be a lengthy process. Now, when I say lengthy process, it can be time consuming. It is not difficult to do. All you need to do is open this file and double click on it. It would give you an option to install it and just say yes. Once you do that, it takes care of all the processes. And once you do go ahead and install that thing, now this is something that would help you have your own server and that is on your local device basically. So this is something that we would be using in the later part. But what I would suggest is you come to this website and download this particular thing if you do not have it. And once you download it, I would suggest that you go ahead and install it as quickly as possible. Again, let me tell you, it might take some 10 to 15 minutes depending upon the processor you have and the internet speed that you have. So yeah, once you're done with this, then what we do is we again switch back to our Microsoft Azure account. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and create a database here. So how do we do that? Well, you go to your portal basically. and quickly log into your so-called account. My internet is fairly slow today, so yep, it might take some time. So this is how your Microsoft portal looks like. You have quite a few things to select and choose from. You can just go ahead and click on create a resource here, and it gives you quite a few options to select from. Or instead, what you can do is you can just come here and look for your so-called databases. And I select an SQL data warehouse. So it would ask for a database name, give it a proper name, say demo DB is what I would call it. And yes, the name is acceptable. My subscription is Azure 533. I would be needing to create a resource group. For people who do not know what a resource group is, it is nothing but think of it as a place where you put in all your resources basically. So it is a group of resources. Again, if you need to understand more about it, we do have a session on it, which you can take a look at it on YouTube. So I say create a new one. Say I call it demo RG, and let me just pick a blank database. I need to configure a server to it. So I would say create a new one. Let's name it say demo server, and I should give it some numbers. Probably yes, it is acceptable. And you need to create some login credentials when you do log into the server. So let those credentials be say admin demo maybe. There you go. And what password should I set? Let it be strong and let it have a number and a symbol basically. Location South India. That does not matter a lot. You can choose the location that is there in here. You have quite a few options. There you go. I would stick to what it is there and I would say select. Yes. So I have a demo server as well. Performance level. Now it depends as per your need, as in how fast do you want it to work. Now as far as my so-called demo is concerned, I do not need it to be very fast or something like that. Let me have it to this value. Now based on the location where you've created your so-called resource, the prices would be given to you. Now this is something that I created in South India, so the price to me is in INR, that is Indian rupees, and it is 223.88 per hour. All I would do is I'll just go ahead and apply. I would say pin to dashboard and I would say create. Now the deploying might take a little longer than normal because yes, as I've already mentioned that it depends on the internet speed, and even if your internet is faster, at times it might take a longer while for this thing to happen. So what I'll do is I'll just pause the video for a minute, and once the deployment is done, I'll get back to the demo part again. So yes guys, I've gone ahead and I've done the process. That is, we have our so-called demo DB already. It took a while. I actually went back and had a cup of coffee as well. It took that long. My internet is really slow today. So yeah, let's move further and now try to go ahead and do the other thing that we are supposed to do. As I've already mentioned, you need to go ahead and install SSMS. If you do go ahead and install it, this is how it would look like. Now, since we've already created a database, we can log into it. You can go ahead and give in your credentials here. That is, I would be putting in the credentials which I've mentioned. That is demo server 1100, and then the extension, that is database .windows.net. Yes, and the name here is admin demo. I can go to options here, connect to what database. We have something called as demo DB, and that is 321 TCP IP. I say connect. It wants me to sign into my so-called Azure account. I hate this each time it happens because I've already logged in. I should have stayed signed in, but I did not, and that is costing me now. Yeah, one more thing. At times you would be logging in from your client user or your client PC, and at times you might not be an administrator. So in that case, you need to change the firewall rule and make your system accessible here. And there you go, I've signed in. So we have our information here. That is, this is my server I used to log in. And if I click on databases, the schema is there. We have our database, that is DemoDB321. Now what we can do is we can actually go ahead and add a table to it. Now I'm not gonna go ahead and create a table, a completely new table. Instead, I'll just go ahead and maybe run a simple query which lets me have 2 columns. So what query should I put in? What table should I create? I'll just go ahead and pick up some query from Microsoft Azure website. Now this is something that lets you create a table with this name, and these are the so-called variables or column names that your so-called table will have. So I'm just going to copy this piece of code. If you want it, you can go to Microsoft Azure website and you can have this piece of code as well. I'll share the link, do not worry. So when I close this and I come here and I click on this, I say new query, and I simply go ahead and paste this piece of code. Now I'll just make some changes to the name just to get rid of ambiguity, say 2, maybe 3, and I would be inserting 2 records in it. So this is the changes I make here, that is insert into this so-called table, and to do that I would say execute. Okay, this should not take this long, but it is. Now once it does happen, these are the 2 records that would be there, that is John Doe and Jane Doe. There you go. 1 row is affected is what it says. So we have actually gone ahead and logged into my SSMS, and we have connected to our SQL server, and we've created a table there. And as far as the table goes, it has these 2 records. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to again switch back into my so-called Azure Data Factory, that is to my Azure account, and create an Azure Data Factory basically. So how do we do that? First thing you need to understand is, in order to have a resource group or have all these resources there on your system, you need to have a storage account. Now this account is nothing but more or less a compliance or a law basically. What that law does is it lets you have your storage entities on Microsoft Azure. So let us go ahead and create that account first. It is very easy. You come to this portal. Once you do that, you just scroll down and you see storage accounts here. And I say add. When I say add, this window should appear and you need to enter in details. So what details should I give in for my storage account? Let's call it say SA for demo. Now it is not accepting this name. Okay, it needs to be in lowercase. So I would say SA for demo, and there you go, it is taken. Resource manager is what I stick to, and I say V2. Location is South India. Now I've talked about your data getting replicated 3 times, that is 3 copies are maintained. And when I talk about the replication, these are the types of replications that you have. Locally redundant storage is which I'm selecting, which is the most affordable one. It is not very reliable, but since it is a small demo, I can use this. Performance should be standard. And if you see, by default, the blob storage is always hot. And when you talk about a resource group, let's go ahead and use the one that is already there. Our resource group was demo RG, if I'm not wrong. Yeah, let's select this. Pin it to dashboard and I say create, and my storage account would be created. This should happen quickly. There you go. The deployment again might take a longer while. So yeah, what we've done is we've gone ahead, we've actually created a database. We've connected to a server, put a table there, and now I've created a storage account. Since I have a storage account, I can go ahead and create again containers, and then I can use data factory to basically move data between various sources. As you can see, it has been deployed. Do I want to go there? Yes, I do. Now, when you come here, you see this so-called tab. Here you have something called as access keys. What you can do is you can actually come here and copy some of the data that is here. This is the name of your storage account, which you would be needing. Now, there are quite a few terminologies that you need to remember when you are using or going through this demo. Like I mentioned, you have created a database. You need to know its name or remember its name. You need to know the server name. What is your server admin credentials? Plus, what is the name of your storage account, which is this in this case. The key, I'm not sure whether we would be needing it or not, but if we do, I would still say that you copy this first key that is here, Control A, Control C, and I would just paste it. There you go. Now, when you move back to this page, you have this option here, blobs, where we're going to go ahead and create a container. You can click on it. As you can see, there's no container here. So you click on this plus sign and you have an option to create a container. So what do we call this particular container here? Let's call it say blob. Again, you need to use something small, that is demo new blob, maybe is what I'll name it. And I'll let the public access level be the way it is. And I would say, okay. And my blob is created here. Now, I won't be adding a destination folder or something here, because when you do go ahead and move your data, a destination folder is created automatically. So let's not do that. Let it be the way it is. So I have a blob storage or a container with me. Now I need to go ahead and create a data factory here. So how do we do that? Come here, search for data factory directly. There you go. Now this is not where I want it to be. So I close it. I click on analytics. And here I have the option of data factory. I click on it. Yes. So I can create a new data factory. So what should I call this? Let's say demo df. Okay, it's still not there. So that is surprising. Okay, let me just try a few names and come back quickly. So this name is accepted now. So use an existing resource group. Which resource group did we have? It was demo RG if I'm not wrong. There you go. V2 is the latest version that we have. And do we need to bother about this thing? Let's say, okay, these are the areas that are there in the option. We select this, pin to dashboard, and I say create, and I have a data factory with me. So this might take a while. So let me again pause it and switch back to the time. No, I don't need to do that. It's created. Okay, so I have a data factory with me. Now I need to come here and click on this because I need to go ahead and move my data. So I come here. When I click on this thing, I would be given quite a few options to deal with. So I need to copy my data. So I click on this icon. There you go. I need to give a name to the task that is there. Let's call it, say, copy from DB to blob. And I go to next. I need to select an SQL server here. So I come here and I scroll down. Now the interface might vary from different portal accounts. This is what it looks like as far as my so-called system goes. SQL server, here it is. I select it and I say create a new connection. There you go. You'll have to scroll down right at the bottom. SQL server. Okay, did I miss it somewhere? Yeah, here it is. You select it, say continue, and you need to give a name to your new linked service. Now, what name should you give it to you? Say SQL server demo link maybe. And I also need to go ahead and create an integration environment. So I come here and I click on this thing and I say create new public network. I say next. So what name should I give it to it? Let's call it, say, demo integration maybe. And I say finish. Now, as you can see, what we've done here is I've gone ahead and I've given in details for my so-called source. That is the place from where I'm going to go ahead and use all the data. So I have this. So I need to go ahead and give in my server credentials again. So if I'm not wrong, the name was, I'm telling you, you need to write everything down because you would be using all these names. So a best practice would be to write everything down. So in my case, it was something like demo server 0011, if I'm not wrong. Sorry, 1100. The extension is .database .windows .net. There you go. The database name was demo DB 321. SQL authentication username was admin demo, if I'm not wrong. I scroll down and I enter the password. That is and I say finish. So yeah, my source details are given in already. That is, this is my source data store, and these are the informations, or this is the place from where I would be wanting to move in my data. So I go to next, and then I enter the details about the destination now. But before that, what we do is I need to select a table. If you remember, we had run a small SQL query to give you the details. I do not remember the name. It was, what was the name of the table? Was it EMP3? Was it? Yeah. Let me just refresh it to see if the information is there or not. I scroll down and it is here. So I select it and it would load the preview saying that, okay, these are the records that are there. Now these were the records that we entered. So I say next. For my destination, I'll come here and I would select a blob storage now. There you go. Create new Azure blob storage and I say continue. Now I need to enter in details here as well. Let me just call it, say, Azure storage demo link. Let me just do this thing again quickly. Now we need to select a storage account name as well, because we've gone ahead and created a storage account here, which was for the demo part. What was the storage account? I forgot the name of it. It was storage account for demo if I'm not wrong. And I've selected that. And then I say finish. I click on next. Now this is the service that I wanted to connect to. I say next. Now I have to enter the so-called details. For that, I would be actually needing the name of my blob, which I think I've forgotten. So let me just go ahead and get the details of that as well. It was something like this, that is demo blob, and the file name was emp3 if I'm not wrong. I say next. I say next. Next again, and I say next. And there you can see the data has been deployed. That is, I've actually connected my SQL server and I've gone ahead and I've moved the data to my so-called blob storage, which you can actually also do. Then you can go ahead and edit the pipeline if you want, as you want, or you can just go ahead and monitor this data as well. Now it depends on your needs as in what do you want to do. You can go ahead and do quite a few things with it. That is, you can go ahead and move this data to your so-called Power BI and implement various other things on it as well. When we did go ahead and create our so-called blob storage, that is blob container, you can actually go ahead and keep that part or that so-called window open, because when you do go ahead and deploy this data, you can see all the details, that is what has just happened and how has it happened, all those things. So yes, what we've done is we've gone ahead and we've moved our data from a so-called database to our blob storage. Now, I actually accidentally went back and did not go through that step where we see the deployment, but do not worry, we can just go back to our dashboard and take a look at that thing as well. So how do we do that? I have this so-called storage account here. Now inside that storage account, we have our blobs where we moved our file. Now this was the blob where we moved the file, and then this was the file that we moved. So yeah, our deployment has succeeded. That is, we've moved our data from a so-called database to our so-called blob storage. And as far as this demo goes, that is what our aim was. I hope that I did throw a sufficient light on following concepts, that is our data factory and how do you go ahead and create a data factory and use it as a pipeline basically. As far as this session goes, I would be resting my session here and here. Thank you. Bye-bye.